You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Grown and Growing. And if I haven't told you lately, I really appreciate that you listen to this podcast every time a new episode drops. Thank you so much. Please continue to listen and share with your circles. I so appreciate it. I love talking to smart Black women. It is one of the greatest joys in doing this podcast. I get to learn from and talk to so many different women of all walks of life, and it just fills me every time I get to do it. And this week is no different. I have 3 phenomenal guests on the podcast this week, and the focus of our conversation is on sickle cell. Now, on its surface, you may be like, why sickle cell? This disease affects a small subset of the American population, so why are we talking about it? Well, just overall, I think that the conversation that we have is applicable to anyone, whether you have sickle cell or know somebody with sickle cell, or maybe you have a health condition that you're dealing with, or maybe you're completely healthy. There is something in this podcast episode that you can apply to your life today. It's such a good conversation. So why sickle cell? Like I said, it's a niche topic that doesn't impact that many people. I think about 100,000 Americans are afflicted with sickle cell. And according to the CDC, it occurs in 1 out of every 365 Black births. So why are we discussing it on the podcast today? Well, my oldest sister, Sharon, has sickle cell, and I've had a front row seat to watching her battle this disease since we were very young kids. She's now 48, and I want her to share her story. So she's one of my 3 guests. In addition, I have Nicole Farner back on the podcast. She was a guest in episode 33, where we talked about wellness, Black women's wellness, and she was phenomenal. So she's back. She is a former primary care doctor who now works as a physician scientist at the NIH, or the National Institutes of Health. She is currently conducting a research study on the dietary intake and dietary behaviors of adults with sickle cell. At the time of this recording, she is still recruiting for that study. So if you want more information, please go to the show notes. I have a link there. It is because of Dr. Farner that we're even having this episode, because during our conversations, I learned that she was working with sickle cell patients in her research, and I just knew I had to connect her with my sister. So part of them meeting and their conversations are had on this podcast. Finally, I am extremely honored to have Dr. Fatimah Jackson as a guest as well. She has conducted research on the human-plant coevolution, and in simplest terms, she studies the relationships between humans and plants. And she also studies the genetics of people of African descent. Her doctoral dissertation research was on the relationship of certain genetic traits to the incidence and intensity of malaria in Liberia, West Africa. This is important because it led through some breakthrough findings as it relates to sickle cell. And it also explains why sickle cell has been labeled a Black disease in the United States. Spoiler alert, it's not. It's not a Black disease, y'all, and they explain why. Dr. Jackson and Dr. Farner's bios are in the show notes if you want to learn more about these 2 phenomenal women. Like I said, I am honored to have them on this podcast, but let's be clear. The sciences are not my strong suit. That's not where I excel. So there are a few words in here that are way above my head and my pay grade, but don't let that discourage you from listening, because there are still so many valuable takeaways. Just in the first 10 minutes, Dr. Jackson drops so much knowledge, you may have to rewind to catch it all. So without further ado, let's get into this topic. Welcome to Grown and Growing. I have 3 guests today, which is always exciting for me. I have Dr. Jackson, who is a professor of biology at Howard University and a director of their research laboratory, which I do not know the long name for it, but I do know you're the director of research. We have Dr. Nicole Farner here, this is her 2nd time being on the podcast, so she was so good that I had to bring her back. And we also have my sister, who is also making her 2nd appearance on the podcast today. So I have all of these three ladies here today because we are discussing something that is up close and personal to me. We're talking about sickle cell, and I know that is not a common disease that everybody has or that is prevalent, but it is a disease that impacts the Black community primarily, and also has impacted my sister because she has sickle cell. And growing up, and seeing her journey kind of unfold in front of me, and being there to experience how she manages her disease is, why she's here today to talk. But I want to start with Dr. Jackson. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you do at Howard, and outside of Howard, and what is your connection to sickle cell?
So I am trained in biological anthropology. I'm a professor of biology at Howard. Um, I right now I was previously the director of the Cobb Research Lab, which is the largest collection of African American skeletal remains. Um, but I'm now retired from that position and have gotten more so into data science and trying to apply computational methods to problems that are affecting peoples of African descent and
Mm,
you know through the analysis of big data. And so we're really getting some fresh perspectives on health disparities and so forth and so on. But that interdisciplinary approach is what got me into sickle cell research because I had, when I was a graduate student at Cornell, I was very interested in abnormal hemoglobins and I was interested in malaria. So the natural connection is sickle cell and G6PD. And well, there's a whole suite of genetic disorders that we think arose in response to exposure to endemic malaria. Um, and I went to Liberia, West Africa for my graduate work, for my doctoral work. And there I collected genetic information as well as parasitological information, and then tried to develop test a hypothesis about the relationship of these genetic traits to malaria. And it's a much more dynamic picture than we're usually taught in the bio 200, the beginning genetics class, or the introductory courses. um, African populations are incredibly resilient, and um, they have also come up with new perspectives that on the disease because they live with the disease. So they have come up with new perspectives that really put to shame a lot of our kind of simplistic models that we have in the West. And so what I found in Liberia was that people had a whole suite of um, traditional medicines that they used in response to the symptoms associated with sickle cell anemia, and that also um, they it, that th- they also had a diet that interacted with the sickle cell, and that in so as to reduce the severity of the disease. And so we worked on some of the physiology behind that, and that was really pretty interesting because um, in the West, we tend to think that we've got the corner on knowledge.
mm.
And the truth is, the truth is that knowledge is something that God distributes uniformly in all populations, like intelligence and also bad behavior. So everybody gets there a chance to have some of that. And so we paid attention to what the people were saying, and they told us two things that are of relevance to sickle cell. The first was that a diet that was rich in cassava or manioc, or we know it in the Western Hemisphere as yucca, contains cyanogenic glycosides that can physiologically interact with the red blood cell and prevent the red blood cell from sickling. Okay, so
Mm.
that's one thing, or reduce the chances of sickling under conditions of low oxygen pressure. The
Mm.
other thing that they said in Liberia was that they would take the cassava leaves, and this is Manioc esculenta. They take the leaves, put it in water, and then when the mosquitoes would come to deposit their eggs in the water, these cassava leaf water would kill the mosquitoes.
Mm.
So
Wow.
I said, that sounds like an insecticide to me. So we started working with cassava first, and then we switched to some other plants to try to develop an insecticide to reduce the intermediate host or the vector, which is the mosquito in malaria. That's the intermediate host. So if you can get rid of the mosquito or reduce the biting capacity of the mosquito, then you can reduce the transmission of malaria.
Mm.
And in fact, what we found was in Liberia, a part of the country, they were eating a lot of cassava, and another part of the country, not so much, but malaria was endemic throughout. So either sickle cell didn't protect against malaria or something else was going on. So
Mm.
something else that was going on was that, the levels of sickle cell in the population were being propped up by malaria. But if you had something that cut down the malaria, it's like cutting down the legs off of a table. The top of the table will drop precipitously. And so that's what we think is that some of the ethnic groups in Liberia were doing things that inadvertently or perhaps intentionally protected them against having hyperparasitemia, and therefore the need for sickle cell was reduced, and also the diet kind of interfered with the role of sickle cell, so that the sickle cell frequencies could drop a little bit, and the people still didn't suffer any more from malaria because they had the diet coming in interfering with the malarial parasite and also with the severity of sickle cell. So I was really excited about this when I was a assistant professor at Berkeley. And I remember the cool reception that I got from some of the physicians who said, "You sounds like you want patients to manage their own sickle cell, and we can't have that." And I thought,
Oh,
why not?
wow.
you know. So fortunately, there have been some changes over the years and much more patient autonomy than perhaps in the late 70s, early 80s. But I I would like to see even more merging of indigenous concepts backed by Western scientific elaboration, because we're not discovering anything new. We're elaborating on stuff they already knew because they are good observational scientists,
Mm.
So um, I think that that's really a future, and I must say that the CRISPR-Cas9 technology that's being used for sickle cell patients, the first FDA approved trial is on sickle cell patients, but that is just elaborating, building on something that was already known. It's not swapping out genes, it's just simply repressing a suppressor gene that would have reduced fetal hemoglobin production. It's allowing fetal hemoglobin production to continue, and then that fetal hemoglobin interacts with the sickled hemoglobin and reducing the incidence of sickling. So even the genetic engineering is based upon principles that were already in place in Africa, in places like Ghana and Nigeria, where they recognized that people who had hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin did not have the severe anemia. You know, they didn't, phenotypically, they didn't look as bad as they probably should have given their initial genetics. So we're developing a more comprehensive view of sickle cell. But I always say that more people have been enlightened by sickle cell academically than have been cured of sickle cell disease. And
Mm.
'cause once again, we're the guinea pigs, and uh, I would like to see some new initiatives again that build on what the indigenous populations know and tailor that to our lifestyles here, because I think we're basically an African people. So
Right.
we should build on that Africanness, take advantage of it, and tailor our lives to optimize our own inherent biologies. But now I'm getting into my preacher vein.
Well,
So,
you said a lot. I mean, there's so much there.
mhm,
I mean, I can go in 10 different directions, but I think, one of the key things that you said is your focus on Africa and people of African descent, which, in the medical field is not a priority, right? That's
right,
not a priority for in the
right.
medical field. I mean, most of the people who participate in research are white people, white males. And
Hmm.
so, you leave off, a lot of people, not just people of African descent, Black people, but
Hmm.
Asians and other people. So I know my sister has a lot to say, but I'm gonna I'm gonna go to Dr. Farmer next because I know that you have, in your work at the NIH, you are looking at dietary behaviors related to sickle cell. Can you talk about that, your connection to sickle cell?
Sure. I'll start with my connection to Dr. Jackson. So I went to so I've been at NIH as a physician scientist since 2017. And in 2018, a disease specific medicine called Indari came onto the market, which is essentially glutamine for sickle cell patients. And I went to my branch chief and I said, okay, this is to me proof of concept that nutrition, and glutamine is an amino acid, nutritional amino acid, that nutrition is important for sickle cell disease modification, severity modification. Can I do a study? And it was kind of like, okay, sure, yeah, we'll figure it out. And then I had the fortune of going to dinner with Mr. Vince Bonham and NHGRI. And I said the same thing to him. And he said, you need to go study Dr. Jackson. And I said, okay. So I went home and I read about Dr. Jackson. I listened to her lectures on coevolution of plants and humans. And I heard the idea, the importance of elaborating on what was already known in traditional West African culture. So I went back and said, we're going to study thiocyanate. We're going to measure it. We're going to study dietary intake of it. We're going to do a dietary history of people with sickle cell disease. And that got approved. So that is the study that I'm doing now, where we're looking to see in Americans living throughout the US with sickle cell disease, what are the exposures to thiocyanate? Sometimes it can happen through cassava-based foods, but it can also happen through cruciferous vegetables if we have the right metabolite breakdown. So we're measuring that also, and we're doing a lot of food histories. And then we have people that are first generation from throughout the world that are in our studies. So we're also learning about how people that understand the connection to thiocyanate rich foods are actually importing their foods from their home so that they maintain their like symptom-free life essentially with sickle cell
mhm.
disease. And we have patients. So oftentimes, and Sharon, you can expand on this. Oftentimes I hear American patients with sickle cell talk about how they're told by their doctors that they shouldn't expect to live past 40. So we have people in our study that have been eating thiocyanate rich foods, that have been eating vegetables, cruciferous vegetables for decades, that are
Mhm.
in their 60s, in their 70s. We have people that didn't even know that they had sickle cell disease. It was found incidentally when they were in their 40s and their 50s because they had been eating so well
Wow.
throughout their life. So, I mean, I hope that with our study, we show that the importance of like elaborating on what was already known, but was lost when we were brought over here. And I think the important thing is to always remember is that it wasn't just, I always tell my students, it's not just an interruption of freedom. We had an interruption of foodways, and that interruption of foodways disrupted our health. And it's taken decades for us to start to understand the impact of that disruption. And then when you look now at the fact that we are in the most isolated food deserts or food apartheid zones in the country, you just further see the impact of systemic racism on our health.
Yes, yes.
So I have a question. So the thing that you are studying is called thio. What is it? Can you repeat that?
Thio, THIO, cyanate, CYANATE.
Okay. And what is that? It's a protein. It's something found in food.
Dr. Jackson is the expert. I'm not going to answer that question when Dr. Jackson is in the room.
So no, you've done really well, Dr. Farmer. You know that it's SCN, so has a sulfate group on it, and then a CN is the cyanate group, and in the plant, look, plants are like chemical arsenals. They're full of all kinds of chemicals and plant genomes are like twice the size of animal genomes. So they have all these genes. What are they for? To attract us, to repel us, to manipulate us. And I just recently read an article that said that plants, if you stress them, they scream, they emit a high frequency sound. So plants are way more sentient than we've imagined them to be. We just think it's something to pop in your mouth and walk away and not, who cares? It's a carrot. But it looks like there's more going on with these plants. They might be, in some respects, more evolved than we are. So the cyanate is a natural compound found in the plant to protect the plant from predation. In fact, if you took some of those glucosinolates in cabbages in the brassica family, chopped them up and put them in your garden, because I'm working on my garden now, put them in the garden, that will decrease the soil nematodes.
So what does that mean?
You're breaking down the soil worms.
Yeah, you don't need to go buy just take your old leaves of cabbage and kale and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and so forth, and just put that in the soil. It's a natural repellent.
Like compost.
Yeah, yes. Take your cabbage compost, and it's a natural repellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew I was
worms.
I was not the smart person on this podcast today.
Oh no, you're smart. But we've been doing this, and but you realize that plants are not just inert organisms. They're very dynamic, and they contain compounds that can affect our behavior. That's why we say that food and medicine are on one continuum,
right?
And now we understand that even more with the microbiome and the relevance of the gut microbiome to our neurological processes. It may be that your dementia or your depression is because things are not right in your gut,
Which is crazy to me. I'm learning that, but I'm like, oh my gosh. And the thing that I love, and I'm going to use Shay Shay in a second. I call her Shay Shay. The thing that I appreciate about this conversation is that every time I talk to Sharon about like, well, what are they saying? Where are the treatments? What can they give you? And she can talk about this better than I can. It's always a chemical, right? And can you talk about, first of all, Sharon, I want you to talk about your experience with sickle cell. You can tell how old you are if you like. And just, what has your journey been like over these
48 years?
48 years. I mean, I'm gonna let you do it, but go ahead.
Okay, so here's the plot twist, just the tiny bit. I have sickle beta thalassemia.
Okay.
So I have well, you know what that is. So it's the sickle cell trait and then the beta thalassemia trait. So together, the two of those, I've always been told that I have the mildest version of sickle cell, whatever that means. But I know that so I'm fortunate and I'm blessed, you know, to not have to go through blood transfusions. I don't need iron infusions. What I notice about me the most is that my hemoglobin is always low, and I'm tired. I'm or tired all the time. And as far as it's the weather. For me, it's the weather, the mild temperatures, and everything else that puts me into a crisis. So I can say that I'm very fortunate and blessed to know that what happened to have me a crisis every time I have one, what led up to that moment for me to be where I am. And most recently, I'm still learning a lot about this disease. And I think the reason, a big reason for that is because for all my life, I took care of like my children, my family, and now everybody's grown and I literally have to take time and focus on myself. So I'm learning more and more about this illness that I have, this, you know, condition. To most recently, I discovered that, well, I have avascular necrosis, AVN, is what I was recently diagnosed with. And I was so just shocked to find out. I'm like, so what do you mean? Like, how does that happen to me? You know, because I'm in this sickle cell group on Facebook and I hear about all these things or whatever. And I'm like, oh, thank God for this and thank God for that. But then I have this condition, and it was just baffling to me to know that I've developed this. My crises are always usually in my arms and my legs. Usually when I feel like this sensation come down my back, I know that I'm getting ready to have a full-blown overall crisis. So again, though, I don't have the blood transfusions and I don't have, you know, those different things. So that's kind of where I feel I'm different as far as from someone with SC or SS. But as far as I'm okay, you know, like I said, I feel blessed. And at one point there was a moment where they were like, you're not gonna live past 40. And even now, even now that I'm over 40.
Here we go.
It's okay.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Sometimes all I think about sometimes is not making it to 60. Oh boy. So with this, I know that, like, I know personally I thrive in warm temperatures. So within the last, now that I'm literally going through, you know, the life change, the, you know, the perimenopausal. Yeah, so the flashes, like the hot flashes, and then the weather. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, where we can have like 4 different seasons in one day. So for me, it actually takes a toll more so on me mentally, because I'm afraid to be outside or to be in different climates. I'm just afraid all the time. So my quality of life is not as vibrant as it could be, I know. And so the plan is for us is to move in a couple of years, just so I can be somewhere warmer with a little bit more consistent temperatures, because I know how to deal with myself and I know how to take care of myself. But unfortunately, sometimes the weather and the temperatures and everything else, it's honestly taking its toll on me. I don't want to make this a sad and woe is me discussion, but yeah. So I know that I changed my diet like years ago. I literally gave up like chicken and pork and beef. I do a lot of seafood, and I've recently, within the last few years, gave up cheese. So I'm all about eating from the earth. I have this thing where I say from the tree to my mouth. It's like, that's what I want. I want to be on some tropical island where I got my own like garden and I can plant my own foods and eat and live and thrive. So so I love to hear that that having plants and things like that, consuming them, I love to hear that that can help, because I truly believe that it, when I switched over my diet, that I do believe that it helped. You know, I don't, the crises they were less frequent. And I can't even say at this point that they are more frequent. I think for me more so is this a menopause symptom or symptom, or is this sickle cell? Like, I don't know which one it is. Like, what is it? Do I take pain meds or whatever? So that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. And most recently, as far as drugs that they offered me, the first one was hydroxyurea. And I'm saying, and it was like, you take it, it's a very low dose, chemo pill is what they called it. And you would take it every day. And me, I'm saying, every day, I can't see myself taking a pill every day for the rest of my life if I don't need it, because I don't have SS, I don't have ST, I don't have crisis every single day. I'm in the ER maybe once or twice a year, maybe twice is the max that I'm there. And so that was the first thing that they offered. And then most recently, after the AVN, I was diagnosed with that. It's in my right shoulder. They were telling me to take Oxybria. Yeah, and I said no, I don't want to take that either. And so as far, you know, thankfully, I have this hematologist who I just like, where have you been all my life? You know, I was kind of sent to her for a second opinion about the Oxybria, because my it was a nurse practitioner I was seeing that just kept trying to push it down my throat. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to take this drug every day for the rest of my life. So the head hematologist who I was recently sent to as a patient, she spoke to me as like a sickle cell advocate opposed to a physician. Studies say this and studies say that. She basically looked over my history. We had a conversation. She listened to me, and I was blown completely away about her actually taking the time to listen to me and speaking to me as an advocate.
Was she African?
She is, yes, Tanje Ba. And under her specialties, it says sickle cell in adults. Like, in my 48 years of life, I've never seen that. I saw the doctors that, you know, my pediatrician, obviously, who diagnosed me, he was, you know, learning about it, because this was like in the early 80s. And then, you know, like I said, in my big age, here I am finally finding the person that I've been looking for my entire life, who's going to give me, who has a plan for me when I go to the emergency room, who's going to give me a printout of that. So if I'm out of town, I don't fear going to that ER. I could just go if I need to, you know. So that's basically where I am today. I'm sorry. I know I'm way off topic.
No,
you're perfect.
I do want to point out a couple of things that you said that I think are interesting. One, I do love the fact that you are an advocate for yourself, that you never stop asking questions. You, even when you're in the ED and they're trying to push medicine on you or tell you need this or tell you need that kind of medicine, that you know enough to, and everybody who goes to the ED with you, so your husband knows that they need to listen to you and that you know what you're talking about. So I feel like even if somebody does not have a chronic disease or illness, being an advocate for yourself is so important, right? And you know your body better than any doctor because you're in it and you live it. And so just being able, and I know that's not easy all the time, right? I know it's not easy to continue to tell doctors to listen to you. No, that's not right. I need to do this. And I also think that you continuing to find doctors who will listen to you. You switched to a functional medicine doctor because you thought that better fit your lifestyle. And I don't know the exact right definition of a functional medicine doc, but they look at health more holistically generally. than a traditional doctor who thinks about medicine first. So I just want to give kudos to you. And I also want to point out those lessons of, how to be an advocate for yourself, how to not give up on yourself either. And it's so funny that they're here because you are like quasi vegan. And so, to hear that has had the potential to better your health is amazing. And it's awesome. And I'm glad you eat that way. So hopefully we can get over the other barriers. So I'm going to give Dr. Farmer or Dr. Jackson a chance to respond to some of the things that you said.
Through my tears.
Dr. Jackson, you want to go first?
Well, I'm not the clinician. Remember, I'm the
I know. You're the true scientist.
I don't want to be practicing medicine without a license. But I am very pleased, Sharon, that you've taken the bull by the horns and that you have self-empowered, because that's the best type of empowerment. I mean, empowerment is God-given, but we usually have to recognize that, oh yeah, wait a minute, I have opinions. I can read the literature. I have something to say. And you know your body better than anyone else. And I am amazed at how plants contain so many compounds that are beneficial to not only our genomes, but the genomes of our microbiomes, of our microorganisms in throughout our bodies. So there's a lot to be said for empowerment, knowledgeable self-empowerment. And that sounds like what you're doing, which is very important, I
Thank
think
you.
that should just continue and increase. And look, they can always get your lab values. And if the values go haywire, then too many Brussels sprouts.
I love Brussels sprouts too. That's so crazy.
Oh yeah. I just threw that out for the joke, but I don't know if you can eat too many Brussels sprouts. I mean, the truth is that these foods, our original diet is not hot dogs and hamburgers and French fries. Not. And getting back to how we used to eat when we were healthier, even though we had less freedom, but we were physically healthier. I think that's something that we need to do. And African American cuisine needs to be highlighted and broadcast, because we tend to think that everybody else has a cuisine, but we don't. But in fact, we do. And it's quite delicious. And it's at the foundation for the American cuisine. But just asserting ourselves, is just very important. And I commend you for that, Sharon. I think that keep doing, as Ray Charles told me once, just keep doing what you're doing, because South Korea's winning.
What's so funny is that when my sister first told me about the studies with food and how they went to Africa, I was like, see, I'm supposed to be there. I'm not supposed to be over here.
We all are. We all are.
Exactly. Like I would have been fine. Just take me back.
Right.
I will be okay.
Yeah.
So
I have a question. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Nigeria was actually the highest percentage for my DNA, my ancestry.
All of us, yeah.
So crazy.
So, Dr. Farmer, I don't know if you would best answer this question because you are studying food, dietary behaviors in sickle cell patients right now. But so knowing that that foods that are kind of indigenous to Africa or that we consumed more when we were in Africa are better for us. And so now we're here. Number one, how do we get those same foods with the same nutrients in it? I mean, you hear all the time that our soil is bad and this is how this is grown and pesticides. If we eat the same foods here grown in America, will we still get the same the same benefits are there, I guess, because the plant is the same plant. But, you know, are there foods we should try more? So just based on, because we're here and that kind of affects how plants are grown.
Yeah. So I'll say that there is an effect of being here and eating Americanized vegetables. So to give the example of Brussels sprouts and cabbage, the brassica or cruciferous vegetables we've been talking about, they, in the last few decades, since the 70s and the 80s, have been bred to have less of a bitter taste. And that less bitter taste means less of the glucosinolates that Dr. Jackson was talking about that that have the health benefit. So that means that we have to eat more of them to actually receive the correct dosage for our health because of that breeding that has happened. Now, if you get these same vegetables from Asian countries or that come directly from Asian countries, they are more bitter. They have higher glucosinolate content than the Americanized ones. So yeah, everything gets Americanized and Westernized, unfortunately.
That's so crazy that they changed it. I mean, you even changed the taste of the vegetable so it's more palatable.
It's more palatable.
That's why we're so obese.
Exactly. That's why we're so obese, because the food system is set up for food industries, not for people. And so if you want people to eat more industrialized food, then you have to even make the vegetables more palatable for the taste buds that you are now curating, which are the fat laden and the salt laden and the sugar laden taste buds.
Wow. That's just so crazy.
It just dawned on me that we didn't really talk about what sickle cell is. Like,
we jumped right in, didn't we?
Because I know we all know, but I think people listening, if they're listening because they're curious or they're listening because they have a family member or friend afflicted with sickle cell, can we describe what happens in the body that causes sickle cell?
I don't know who wants to start.
You can start, Dr. Farner.
Okay, I can start.
You start. You're the clinician.
Okay,
you are the clinician.
Okay, so sickle cell disease comes from genetic mutations, about a handful of different genetic mutations that affect our hemoglobin. And so hemoglobin is in the center part of everyone's red blood cells, and it has the job of carrying oxygen to our tissues and to our organs. And with the sickle cell gene mutations, you have an altered hemoglobin. And so instead of the red blood cell being like round, it now becomes like a banana shaped. And that banana shaped red blood cell, they can stack on top of each other. And when they stack on top of each other in the presence of our smallest blood vessels, they can cause pain, they can cause organ damage, and tissue damage. And so that damage manifests as symptoms in people like Sharon was describing, in terms of just tiredness, fatigue, and also pain at times. And then in addition, those banana red blood cells, they don't last as long in the body as the circular ones. And so people become anemic. And so over time, instead of your red blood cells lasting about 90 days, they may last about half that long. When we were in malaria endemic areas, that shortened half-life of the red blood cells was actually protective in terms of protecting us from the malaria. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the exact one, Dr. Jackson, but the parasite actually, Plasmodium parasite actually infecting our red blood cells and going into our liver and wreaking havoc and death. But here in this country, we don't need that protection. And so that's the gene environment mismatch that we have with sickle cell disease.
Exactly.
So Sharon described, I think I counted 3 different kinds of sickle cell. So she has a version of sickle cell. There's 2 other versions that are more serious, I'm gathering. What is the difference between the 3?
So the ones that Sharon mentioned, the other one, the other 2 were SC and SS. So I'll step back, and I know I'm in the presence of Dr. Jackson, who is a geneticist, but every gene mutation that we have 2 copies of our genes from each parent. And in order for us to have a mutation like sickle cell disease, we have to receive 2 copies of that mutation in the hemoglobin. For people that have SS, they receive a sickled hemoglobin from one parent and then a sickled hemoglobin from another. For individuals that have SC, they receive a sickled hemoglobin gene mutation from one parent, and then they receive what we call a C hemoglobin mutation from another parent. And then as for Sharon, one parent provided a sickled hemoglobin or sickle cell hemoglobin, and then another parent provided a beta thalassemia hemoglobin. And so beta thalassemia is another type of inheritable conditions that we see overlap with geography with sickle cell, especially in the Mediterranean region and some parts of Africa. And that causes your red blood cells to not become banana shaped, but to become really, really small and not carry a lot of iron efficiently.
Interesting. Okay. And so why does it primarily affect Black people?
In this country,
it's not
it
the
does.
blackness.
No, it's
In
not.
this country.
It's the malaria.
It's the malaria. Globally,
Yeah.
it's not a Black person's disease.
Yeah.
So it's always been described as that, though. Like it predominantly affects Black people.
That's racism. That's racism in
Racism.
medicine. That started in 1972 with the Sickle Cell Anemia Control Act, and how that then introduced sickle cell as the Black person's disease.
Right.
Because of malaria, it exists. Associated with Black people.
So wherever they have malaria, if you're talking about India, if you're talking about Greece,
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, all those places, and they have people who have sickle cell. For us in the United States, it must be very confusing for physicians who have been bred with the idea that it's a Black disease, and then they find it in their Guatemalan
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Which happens quite a lot.
I'm shocked because I've always thought it was something that predominantly affected Black people because there was something about us that made the disease thrive, and it's not. Everybody.
It was
go ahead,
Doctor. It was advantageous. It was a good thing.
Right.
But a good thing in the wrong environment can become a bad thing. That's the mismatch that Dr. Farner spoke about. So we have quite a few examples of that, but sickle cell is one of the best known because it's advantageous to have it in a malarious environment. You know.
So I'll have to admit, I also thought it was predominantly. I know that there were other different ethnicities and races, whatever, that had it. Like I said, I'm in the sickle cell group on Facebook, and it's from people from all over the country. And they're in this group, and some of them don't look like me. And I knew, just even with me, based on my beta thalassemia, that I knew that came from the Mediterranean area. And I know that a lot of us aren't from that region. You know, there's other different, types of people. So that's something very interesting.
So 2 things that really make it confusing is that in medicine, we forget about the importance of ancestry, and we use race as a proxy for ancestry. But our ancestry can be predominantly from cultures and heritage lines in Africa, but obviously there are also going to be other lines of heritage in everyone's ancestry that contribute to our genetic makeup. And then 2, so a lot of people don't know this. So 1972 is when the Sickle Cell Control Act came out, and the Blackness was labeled with sickle cell disease. At that time, it was left up to doctors to determine who would be screened for sickle cell. And you can imagine what ended up happening is that Black newborns, Black children were screened. Other children were not. So there you are now, like changing the pool of who actually gets detected and who actually gets tested. It wasn't until 2006 that it actually became mandatory to test every newborn for sickle cell.
2006?
2006. So we don't have an accurate accounting of who has trait and who actually has sickle cell disease before 2006 in this country.
Wow.
Ooh, that's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah. My boys, they were tested because I have it, and I was like, "Can you just test them? I need to know." So my oldest doesn't have anything, and my youngest has beta thalassemia.
I'm glad you got
So,
tested.
yeah, I
So,
push for them.
Good. Very good.
so Dr. Farmer, now that you have a study ongoing right now, um, with the NIH, what are you learning in your study? Like the either about the people who are participating or how their life has changed based on, your
Yeah.
food recommendations, or I know it's a clinical study, but what are you learning in
The
your study?
biggest thing I have learned is that there is no typical person living with sickle cell disease. And the story that I was told in residency in medical school about what to expect is actually not what to expect when you are recruiting people that are living throughout the country. I mean, we have people that do physical activity, that do all kinds of yoga,
Yes.
that do holistic therapies. And I think that our study, because we are the diet and sickle cell study, I think we are selectively recruiting the people that want to tell their stories about how lifestyle makes a difference. But I think it's an important story for us to get out when we start publishing the papers, so that people start to get a more holistic view about what people can do that have the genotype, that the genotype is not, going to absolutely lead to death at 40 or going to
Yes.
lead to a poor quality of life. There are lifestyle modifications that people can make for that not to happen. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned. And I've learned a lot from patients that have, I mean, we sample people from California to Georgia, Alabama, rural areas, Kentucky. And what I'm hearing is people that know that diet makes a difference, they're using the same foods. So like they're using cruciferous vegetables, they're using spinach, which is very high in folate. They're minimizing the processed foods. So I think it's great that people are learning that observation skill that Dr. Jackson talked about, that I think we inherently have in our ancestry. I think people are learning how to come back to that to make themselves healthy.
Mhm. And
I
it's just
love
a
that.
healthier way to
Yeah.
live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing you said that just, yes, every person living with this illness is different. So what
Yes.
boils my blood with me is when if I'm talking to maybe mostly caregivers, if I'm talking to someone who either has a child living with sickle cell or whatever the case, and I'll say something that I have, and it's always, well, it could be worse. Well, this is my journey and this is my struggle, so it's not the best for me. Yes, I'm well aware that it could be worse. I
Mhm.
understand that. No one understands that more than me. But it really irks me when I hear people say that it could be worse, or well, comparing their situation to mine. Like this is me, and I have to deal with it based on my own terms. So yeah, I think it's important for people that are dealing, or if you know someone with sickle cell, or if you are living with someone with sickle cell, what you can do for them is just to be supportive of, and to in situations where they can't advocate for themselves, be an advocate for them. Because I tell my husband all of the time, do not leave me here in this emergency room by myself. Just please,
Right.
just don't. If
Right.
you can't be here, call my mom. 48 years old, yes, call my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'll never forget back when it was like I was turning 30. I was literally turning 30. And I had the most massive sickle cell crisis that I have had. And of course, me mentally is like, oh my God, this is it. I'm turning 30. This is it for me. And I ended up staying in the hospital. And normally I knew from growing up that hospital stays when I was growing up would be no more than 3 days. Well, here it is, with all of the research that has happened up until me turning 30, that I'm in the hospital, it's like day 3 and I'm still here. However, when I was admitted, the first thing I would say to them is, I need a butterfly needle. Do not give me a big needle because I have small veins in one ear and out the other, to the nurses at the hospital that I went to. So I had this massive needle for my IV going through my arm, which then caused me to develop pneumonia because there was so much fluid in my body pumping in too fast. So then I had to go through that whole phase. By then, my crisis had subsided, and I was now dealing with pneumonia in the hospital. I'm like, how the heck did I get here? Because no one was listening to me, you know. And so it was after that point, I became, once I, you know, thankfully I was released. I was there for like a week in the hospital. I was released. And then that's when I knew in my mind, like, I need to make sure, like, I'm always adamant, this is what I need. This is what I need, you know. So that's helped me as far as, you know, advocating for myself. But I always told my husband, don't leave me here by myself. Most recently, the crisis that I had, and again, I can tell you exactly what happened to lead up to that moment. And ended up going to the ER. The nurse in the ER, everybody that was there for that particular visit, I had never seen before. So the doctor immediately came in, and I'm like, you know, I'm requesting for them to treat me. Are you going to give me an IV? They did the plug, the port for my IV, and then that was it. And I said, are you going to give me fluids? And then she came back, well, let me see if the doctor ordered it. What do you mean? Like, I was here. It seemed like I'm always in the ER around January and February. This particular time, it was in March. I'm sorry, it was in November. And I'm literally requesting for them to treat me. And then he said, well, the pain meds they're giving me, it wasn't enough. And I'm telling him, the doctor, I'm saying, this is not enough. You know, I literally have the medication at home to treat myself if I wanted to. If I wanted to overdose, I could do that at home because I have meds at home. I need something more to help me with this pain. So they're treating me. And then again, I'm asking for everything. He discharged me, literally. He said, only thing I can do now for you is to get you a bed. And I said, I don't need to be admitted. I need pain meds. Once I get what I need, I'll go home. Sent me home. He said, the only thing I can do more is I can give you some Percocet. I hate Percocet. Percocet does nothing for me. So I went home that evening just to return the next day at the ER. Came back to the ER, same doctor. However, the nurse on duty that night was someone that has treated me before. She instantly came in, and just everything that she did, which is what I was expecting, is what made my pain leave. Because once I'm able to calm my body and get some sleep, and I know that I can breathe through this, you know, I'm not new to this, you know what I mean? So they sent me, after she treated me and gave me everything that I needed, I was getting my pain meds, you know, every couple of hours. I went home. I didn't come back. That's all I wanted. I just wanted you to listen to me and treat me. So just me, you know, being in the ER every once in a while, it always makes me feel, my heart goes out to those that has the SC and the SS that has to be admitted. And it's so unfair that we're treated the way that we are treated when we go to the ER. It's unfortunate, and they think we're there just for the drugs. And no, again, if I wanted to overdose on drugs, I can do that at home. Yeah. So, you know, it's frustrating. So that's why my plan in life, I have 2 more winters in the state of Ohio. I can 2 more winters, and I'm out of here. I can't wait to get out of here. I just want to be able to take a walk without saying, oh, should I go out? Or maybe I shouldn't, or just let me lay low. You know, it's too many lay low days here in Ohio, you know, with all of the different seasons. So it's warm right now outside, and I love my sister, so I decided to stay in and ignore the sun and the warm breeze and do your podcast.
Hopefully it'll be warm tomorrow. It will be warm here, so
it will be warm tomorrow. It will be warm tomorrow. So yeah. But I want people to, again, just to know that just find your support system, find your voice, and make sure that you are heard, no matter. Unfortunately, you have to get a little disruptive and a little loud, maybe a little vulgar. Just do whatever you need to do to get the type of the medical attention that you need for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right. That's as it should be. I just wanted to interject that the diet is so powerful that it can change the phenotype. Now, it won't change the genotype, what you've genetically inherited, but the expression of that can be changed by the diet. So you can make someone with sickle cell anemia actually look like they have sickle cell trait through the diet, through dietary intervention. And the other thing is, we're more than just genes for sickle cell. We have the genes for other things too. So when you mentioned the Percocet, I remember learning when I did a whole genome test, I had a whole genome test done on myself, that I carried genetic variants that meant that I don't metabolize Percocet. So you said Percocet doesn't do anything for you. I'm right there with you. Doesn't do a bit for me. But I thought when I realized that Percocet was an opioid based compound, I mean, or opioid affiliated compound, that it kind of felt good. Like, yes, Oxycontin is not going to get me because I'll vomit, I'll throw it up, I'll feel nauseous. In other words, my allergy to Percocet is really a resistance to Percocet. And I wonder how many other genetic traits do we have that they don't know about in the process of treating you, that you need precision medicine. You need
Absolutely.
medicine that is intimately tied to your unique biology.
Yep.
Well,
Yes.
and they don't need to be playing around with different things because,
Yes.
as you said, this is your life, and you also, I'm glad that you're not standing for any gaslighting, because that's a very typical response toward Black patients. Oh, you don't really hurt that much. Oh, it's, or if there's something good about you, then they are amazed at it, but it's seen as something unique and not normative, because you're
Yes.
not normative.
Yeah.
And so I really am glad that you're challenging the people who can mistreat you in a hospital clinical setting, um, on the basis of the poor academic record that exists on African people. I mean, they don't know enough about us. We don't know enough about ourselves. But that can produce deadly outcomes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Dr. Jackson, I know we have to wrap up in a few minutes, but I do want to talk about, or if you could perfect a diet for not just for Black people, but for people who want to live a healthier life, want to, you mentioned earlier in the podcast how dementia is tied to your microbiome, and so many other things kind of start in your gut. So if
Right.
you could perfect like a meal plan for people, or a way to eat, what do
Yeah,
you what would you
so there's
prescribe?
no single meal plan because we're all individuals. But
Hmm.
given that, understand your body and understand your reaction to some of the drugs that we're exposed to, so that if you can avoid some of the drugs. I'll give you an example. I used to suffer from GERD, from gastrointestinal distress, and acid reflux, and they had me on PPIs.
Yep.
Uh, well, PPIs have a lot of, first of all, PPIs do the wrong thing. They make your gut less acidic, which means that they're messing with your immune system, because
Yes.
that's your first line of defense, because that high acidity in your stomach kills off a lot of the pathogens. So now if you're making your stomach less acidic, then you're making yourself more vulnerable to infections. So a colleague of mine at Howard University, Dr. Hassan Ashtarab, has a research group that I participate in, and they have been doing clinical trials on sassafras. No, saffron, not sassafras,
Saffron.
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 And
Okay.
so I went to Amazon, bought a little container of saffron, make my soup every morning, and add the saffron. And since saffron, uh, the active agents are released more readily in an oil environment, I put a little teaspoon of olive oil in there.
Is it really soup? Is it soup, or is it like
broth, like
a
consomme?
broth,
okay, broth,
like a consomme.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my husband has acid reflux and stomach issues. I told him he needs to change the way he eats because he's like,
try
amazing.
this stuff, because right immediately I started responding. So I threw away the PPI because one of the side effects of PPI is you get C. difficile. And how do you know C. difficile? Because your feces really stink in little balls, So that, I said no. Sometimes the medicines make us, they address one symptom, but they cause
yes, a medicine for the medicine for the medicine.
Yeah. So if you can go with a food that, remember, food and medicine are on this continuum. So if you can find a food, you can generally take that food without the negative repercussions because it's a food. It's not the super concentrated medicine that you get from the pharmacy. So that's just one example, but you have to constantly make assessments of your body. And then I back it up by having lab work done periodically. And the lab work reminds me that, even though I'm not taking a phosphate binder, my phosphate levels are in the normal range. How is this possible? Well, one thing, I shifted from a primarily carnivorous diet to a vegan diet. I'm not a real vegan because I like salmon, but
that's me.
You are plant centric. You are plant centered, Doctor.
Exactly, plant centered, and we get this delivery once a week of all kinds of vegetables, and I'm hustling to try to cook all of those vegetables because I hate to waste. And that, I feel better. I feel healthier. My husband, who's a big meat eater, he likes it now. He says that his system is more regular. So
you look great. Your skin is like amazing.
Yes, amazing. Yes.
Not too bad for 72, right?
Well,
I mean, you look amazing.
Yeah. So, it's possible for us at any age to maintain better control of our health. And we are the most important medical client for us. And the physicians, we should use them for the serious diseases that we can't, dietarily intervene with, and use them as resources. But really, we have a personal responsibility to give ourselves that precision medicine. It starts with us, I believe.
Yes.
I agree.
Dr. Farmer, I'm gonna give you. I'm sorry. I was gonna give her the last word, but Sharon,
I ditto everything Dr. Jackson just said. That's it. That's my last word.
Sharon.
No, I'm just gonna say that was another drug that I gave up, was those PPIs. Like, I'm not gonna freaking take this pill every day for the rest of my life.
You know what?
I can't stand medicine. I can't stand taking pills, and I can't stand that. I don't like it.
I will say, I'm an allopathic doctor, but I also am trained in integrative medicine. And the difference with food and medicine, that continuum difference, is that the medicines oftentimes change our physiology. And so in that change of physiology, they're not representing the fact that our physiology is a system, right?
Yes.
So if you change the acid production capability within our stomach, you are changing our immune system. Like Dr. Jackson said, everything is a system. But when you're with food is almost, in plant medicine and in herbs, we say like adaptogenic. So that's supportive of the physiology. Yes. And so in supporting the physiology, there is honoring the fact that it's part of the system, and you can't push it too far one way or the other. You just have to get out of its way so that the healing can happen. And I think that that's the difference with food and medicine.
I love that.
And the thing about Americans in general, and I'll say this about myself, is that because of the way we eat, because of our diet, because of medicine, you don't really know your body. So I don't even know when something is not right. I'm working with a nutritionist now, and I'm eating a lot more healthier than I have been, a lot more vegetables and stuff like that. And, I was telling her, I'm like, I don't even know when something is off or not, because I feel like the food, the diet, like, has numbed me to my body's own responses.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
it wasn't until this weekend I went to a friend's house. I had a cupcake, which I love cake. It's my favorite, but I hadn't had it in the 6 weeks that I've been working with her. Went to eat it. It upset my stomach. And I was like, oh my gosh, that bothered me. And I probably never would have noticed that any other time. It probably bothered me before, but I'm so numb or used to it or whatever that it didn't get to my brain that was not good for me. And because I hadn't had it for a long time, I'm like, oh, that didn't make me feel good. And I didn't, so I just, it's a shame that, I work in healthcare. I work at an academic medical center, and it just sucks that that medicine is pushed so often to cure the simplest things, and that like, I know people who have been on blood pressure medication for like 40 years. And I can't even imagine what that has done to their bodies, or what has caused that, to take medicine that long, or be on birth control that long, or any of the things that we're on for forever. So
absolutely.
This is a great conversation. I mean, I feel like I can talk forever, but I will spare you all. You can at least go have a nice evening if you're in the DMV, and it's still nice outside. You can still have a great evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. It was so great to meet you and speak with you.
Yes, it was great meeting you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nicole, of course. I'm sorry, Dr. Farmer.
Dr.
Farmer, it was great speaking with you again. I hope we get to meet in person one day.
Yeah, we have to make that happen.
Yes, we do. And to my sister, thank you so much for opening up your life and sharing your experience.
Yes,
thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
I enjoyed. Yes, I look forward to hopefully meeting both of you one day.
Yes, same here.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you
so much. And for everybody else,
Don't interrupt my exit, my closing.
Sorry, I said it was a lot of great information.
Yes, it was a lot of great information. Thank you for listening. And for everybody else, I will see you next time.